I have a confession.
Okay.
So I think I've said this before publicly.
Privately to me multiple times.
Privately to you multiple times, and much to the chagrin of my son.
Yeah.
I thought the American Office sucked.
Hi, and welcome to the Storia podcast where storytellers disrupt. I'm David Nerenia.
And I am Fabiano Andrea Altamura.
Andrea, do you have a girl's middle name?
That's Andrea. Andrea means Italian. It means Andrew.
Whatever. I think, yeah. Okay,
let's not talk about the Andrea, though. It's like, this is one thing.
Okay.
So I'm being born, and my parents hold me and go, oh, I think that's a nice name. Fabiano. I'm like, it means bean grower or successful farmer. That's literally what it means.
This is the opposite of who you are because, you know, typically biblical name would prophesy identity. You're about the furthest thing. I mean, unless farmers are obsessed with...
And funny, I live on a small farm as well. It's so ironic.
Which we joke as Aunt Farm. There's a couple favorite things about... My favorite thing is to hear people who don't know you pronounce your name. What are some of the versions of your name? Fob. Which always to me sounds like a key fob.
Key fob. And then the rest is...
They call you Fabio as well sometimes because they don't know it's
Fabio. Oh, I hate that. It reminds me of that like 60-year-old long-haired model.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the 80s. I'm like, oh, no. And then this was so funny. In the UK, they said, oh, what's your name? So I said, it's Mr. Altamura. So in the post, I get a letter and it says, Mistral Tamura. So I'm like this Japanese new age woman now called Mistral Tamura.
That should definitely be the cover of your album. Okay, so before we continue the shenanigans, remember to like, subscribe, follow, and give us that 5-star review. So listen, we've explored a lot of territory here in the new and exciting, new and improved Storia season 2, but we want to have a little bit of fun today. Brother, what do you want to dive into? Very serious topic.
So listen, I have a confession.
This is the season of confessions.
I have a confession.
Okay.
So I think I've said this before publicly.
Privately to me multiple times.
Privately to you multiple times, and much to the chagrin of my son.
Yeah.
I thought the American Office sucked. Like literally, when you've watched the UK Office, you can't really remake it because Ricky Gervais is a genius.
He is.
Whether you like him or not, I think he's very talented. So I watched the UK Office multiple times, and I love it. My wife can't watch it, so I never.
Why can't she watch the British one?
It's too close to the bone, man. It's like so real.
It is very edgy too.
It's very edgy, which I don't mind too much, but it's very British.
It's very British, and in my experience, I was about to say you Brits, but you often then correct me and say I'm Italian, not British.
Correct.
But you do claim dual citizenship in many ways because you are snobbish when it comes to American sitcoms. You've often said to me,
I love American sitcoms.
This is true, actually. You like Friends. We should have a whole episode of Friends, but that's not what we're talking about today. But you have been a little bit snobbish to me. And by the way, I understand because I first watched The British Office as well. This is my quick confession. I watched The British Office when I was still living in Los Angeles. I think I actually somehow got like a bootleg copy or somehow was able to watch it by, I'm going to confess to my illegalities, VPNing it off of British TV. I forget how I got it.
Yeah.
This, people may forget, but when the British Office first came out, people, including me, I thought it was a kind of weird British documentary.
Yeah, and that's where the frame mockumentary came, you know.
Well, okay, so Christopher Guest and you know, there were others that were doing mockumentary, right? Spinal Tap and these kinds of yeah. But I would concede this, that it was very uncommon. It's a kind of hyper niche genre that had been kind of, and only like those niche people that like Spinal Tap and those kinds of things, those kind of mockumentary would have known that type of. So if you were just watching TV, and I heard that there were Brits who would just turn it on because you guys only have like 3 or 4 channels anyways over there. And I think they're all called 1, 2, 3, 4 BBC.
Exactly, yeah.
If I had turned it on and not had any context, I might have thought it was just a documentary about this paper
terrible boss,
and a horrendous boss. Okay, so I watched it, And I actually ended up binge watching it.
Yeah.
Because the thing about the British Office that I thought it did so remarkably well, and you guys only do like 8 episodes a season, 6 episodes.
There was 6, then a Christmas special.
Right. And then I think they did another 6
2 seasons, another 6 and a Christmas special. 8 episodes in effect.
I think I binge watched them in like 2 days. Yeah. And by the time, I don't want to give away too much, because if you haven't watched the British Office, you should absolutely do. Yeah. Just Surgeon General's warning. Yeah. There's language and there's behavior. I was absolutely bawling by the end because I was so rooting for your Jim and Pam.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so charming.
It's brilliant. I mean, the storytelling is brilliant. The acting, I think, is brilliant, and
it's next level.
They've all gone off to become, major stars. But
you hadn't watched The American Office.
But then, dude, so I watched the first episode.
When?
I watched the first episode maybe a few years ago.
Okay,
and it was virtually verbatim.
Sure.
Of what the first episode of the British Office.
But listen, the first season, let's just say this right now, and I'm going to piss some of the fans off, but I think we got to be honest about this. The first season of The American Office was hit or miss. It was not its best season. I mean,
there were only 6 episodes anyway.
Well, yeah, right? Well, because you know the story behind it. And I mean, there's some great podcasts actually by the dude that plays the guy that
The Temp.
No, not the Temp. He was one of the producers.
He was one of the producers and the writers.
Yeah, and one of the writers. But no, but Kevin, the guy who plays Kevin, the big guy.
Oh, yeah.
The heavy guy that loves to eat. He has a podcast that gives you all the behind the scenes on it, which I highly, highly recommend. By the way, you will hear him speak in the podcast and you will not recognize his voice. I think what a lot of people misunderstand about both the British and the American version is the brilliance of the acting in it. Because I think it's taken for granted.
It is brilliant. And I think that what I love about it is when you watch the outtakes.
Oh.
They are having so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
But, Ricky Gervais is just improvisationally, he's a genius. And just the whole scene and
By the way, if you're listening and you're not watching, he's doing all of the character gestures and body postures.
Just brilliant.
Okay, so you watched the first episode?
I just watched one episode.
Okay.
Couldn't stand it.
Well,
I hated it.
That is, by the way, I want to say something. I think that's understandable. If you go back and you watch the pilot, it is by far one of the weakest episodes of the hour. I mean, it's a miracle that it kept going. And, it was on the bubble, which is an industry term for it was probably not going to get renewed.
Mm-hmm.
And this went on for years and years. All right. So you watched the first episode. You didn't like it.
No, because what you're trying to say is even though Steve Carell is a phenomenal actor, he's in somewhat mimicking Ricky Gervais in somewhat. And I don't like mimicking. I'm a bit like, you're just adding a different accent onto it with an American A-lister. And I'm like, I just didn't like it. But
so then what happened? You didn't watch it?
Didn't watch it 2 days ago.
2 days ago.
2 days ago with my son.
What motivated you to watch it?
My son's leaving, so any spare time that I can get with him,
yes,
I'm just spending time with him. Like we just watched Jeremy Clarkson. He's got a series called Clarkson's Farm, so we binge watched that, and then
this is Joshie Altamura, who's friends with Knight Noronha. They have their own podcast.
Yeah,
Juvie,
exactly.
And he's currently moving away, and you're in dad mode right now.
Yeah, I'm like,
whatever he needs, whatever he wants.
Devastated and also excited for him. So we sit down and we start watching The Office.
You pick up at episode 2?
We did. So we binge watched the first season.
Okay.
And now we're like 7 episodes into season 2.
Okay. So so you're watching.
Yeah.
You watched the pilot years ago, hated it, not going to watch it. American, sitcom stuff this one is trashy. You start watching it. At what point of watching The American Office does it flip?
Probably like episode 4 of season 1.
Okay. Was there a moment? What was it that flipped it for you?
He just says, give it a chance, Dad. And when people say to me, like, there is some TV shows that are like, oh, you've got to give it to 4th or 5th episode. And I'm like, dude, I mean, it's like people go, you've got to end up watching 5th season of Breaking Bad. I'm like, I was dying of boredom at the end of season 4. I can't go into season 5 because I was so bored. Josh is like, yeah, but it's the best season ever. I'm like, dude, they lost me at the end of season 4.
Okay, so here's what happened for you and I. We're going to take a detour for a second about Breaking Bad because it is considered by many to be one of the most perfectly written pilots and American television series of all time.
I'm not arguing that, but I mean, 4 seasons of the same thing, like Bryan Cranston and Aaron Paul. I mean, like phenomenal acting.
Geniuses. Yeah.
The acting is phenomenal. And like when you watch anything to do with Bryan Cranston, he's a consummate artist.
100%.
Theatrically, cinematically, phenomenal. But I'm just like, I don't know if I can watch any more meth stuff. I'm like, good Lord.
Let me pitch you a theory, because the same thing, I have a similar confession. I was in Budapest and I was bored, and it was one of the few shows that I could watch on Netflix because, they block certain shows when you're traveling internationally. And I was like, oh, you know what? Let me dive into Breaking Bad. I've heard so much about the pilot. I mean, it is a dissected, analyzed pilot because it's considered one of the most perfect character arcs of television history. By the way, I agree with them, but here's the other thing that happened to me. So I start binge watching. Now, what people forget is that show was on episodic broadcast. I mean, I think it was like on one of the basic cable channels, FX or something like this. But what people forget is it was built around commercials. And when it came out, you had to wait until the next week. This was being broadcast on TV. This was not on a streamer originally.
Yeah.
So what I think you and I suffered from, here's my quick theory, is Breaking Bad was made for broadcast TV, acknowledging commercials and acknowledging that there would be a week between episodes. If you binge watch, at least this was my experience, similar to yours, Breaking Bad, what happens is its format and its structure is exposed to you through repetition. It just becomes super obvious. Whereas if I had a week between episodes and 3 months, you just forget. You don't remember. The same thing with Lost. If you go back and you watch Lost, you're going to see some of the inconsistencies, some of the stuff. Why? Because we're trying to figure out what the hell they were doing on this island for 6 years.
I think the writers were probably trying to figure it out as well.
They had no idea where they was going to go, and the smoke beast and the polar bear and everything else. I mean, people have dissected it, and but anyway, so that was my point about Breaking Bad. I don't disagree with you on that. All right, so it flips for you around episode 4. How far in are you now on The American Office?
Season 2, episode 6.
Wow.
We've just done the booze cruise.
One of the
best it is of all time. It's just, I can see they use a lot of the kind of devices they're using from the British Office. Oh gosh. What's his name? Scott. What's his name? The lead guy?
Michael Scott.
Yeah. Michael Scott fancying himself as a motivational speaker, like David Brent as a motivational speaker. I actually preferred that one in The Office.
Sure.
In the British Office more. The Booze Cruise was brilliant, but they just gave him more space. But I'm really enjoying it. Like, really enjoying it. The acting is brilliant with John Krasinski.
Yeah.
And Jenna, what's her name?
Jenna. I can't remember her last name.
Yeah,
right
anyway.
Now,
So Pam and
Jim and Pam.
Jim and Pam. It's really beautiful.
Yeah. So I think what they are able to accomplish over time with The American Office, just the simple math of only doing kind of the British 8 episodes a pop or 6 episodes a season and whatever, the way that you guys do it over there, which, by the way, a lot of streamers have now picked up as well. So we're shooting 8, 10, 12 episodes. This is something that was uncommon to Americans. If a show was a hit TV show, you would be shooting 22 episodes unless you're Kiefer Sutherland, and then in which case you call your show 24 so that you get an extra 2 bonus checks. But we just weren't necessarily doing so few episodes. The Office, interestingly, the backstory of it is that it struggled for years and years and years. It is more celebrated today by far than it ever was. It was an outlier. A lot of people didn't know what to make of it. They were super turned off by what has become known now as cringe humor.
Right.
Which I would actually kind of credit Ricky Gervais and others. Afterwards you get Parks and Rec, you get Community, you get a lot of shows that do the mockumentary kind of direct address kind of stuff. But the cringe humor was very foreign. Now we have all of Gen Z, which love watching people skateboard and hit their testicles on a bar, and that has become, or random humor, which I actually think a lot of these shows kind of, made space for. What I think they were able to accomplish in The American Office, it's just a simple mathematical thing, is that they're able to take their time with certain storylines. Like you take the Jim and Pam relationship. I was still moved by the British version of it.
Oh, yeah. It's like the Ross and Rachel in Friends. You know what I mean?
It completely
Hands out over 10 seasons.
But it's so sweet and charming and painful. And there are episodes where literally all they feed to the Jim and Pam storyline is a little glance, a little joke, a little, inner office email or whatever. I also think that Rainn Wilson is an absolute genius as Dwight. Not that the British Dwight isn't funny as all
get out. He's really good. Gareth in the British Office, but I think Rainn Wilson is phenomenal.
Oh, I don't
the codependency between him and Michael. Well, more on his side than Michael's side, but it's just amazing.
I mean, he is the assistant manager. I mean, the
assistant to the regional manager. But there's one thing that I didn't understand.
Okay.
If you haven't seen the Booze Cruise episode,
do you need me to translate something from you to British
Please.
English?
Pam and Jim have got this underlying
sexual tension, romance,
between them.
Attraction, yeah.
She's been engaged for 3 years.
Yeah.
When a boyfriend is drunk on the Booze Cruise, he says, get married. And then you've got Amy Adams that's dating Jim.
Oh, yeah, it is Amy Adams. You're right.
And then she doesn't even acknowledge Jim. She goes straight to a boyfriend and kisses him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that confuses me in that. Was it bad acting, or was there something that...
So
it's like interesting that.
Yeah. I mean, I think what they're borrowing from, I think they borrow a little bit, and forgive me for not knowing the British actress's name. I should have brushed up on this before, but we just decided on a whim to talk about The Office because of your recent discovery of this. But I think they're borrowing a little bit from the mythology of the British one as well, because she had been engaged for forever.
She was engaged forever, but
he was a total noob.
Yeah, but she never really looked like she was ever interested in her fiance. Whereas Pam, when he says we're going to get married on June 10th or whatever it is that year, she doesn't even acknowledge Jim, and she goes up and kind of, celebrates it.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably an unpopular way to describe it, but there was a little bit. I mean, I think Pam's character, for me, it's a really beautiful character. She's a little bit codependent. She maybe just doesn't think that she's as beautiful as she is, although I think she's just so lovely, and she's like an every girl.
She's like a plain Jane.
Absolutely, but there's just such beauty to the simple girl that you're around who's just, I think her character is incredibly almost kind to a fault. And I think that's a point of connection. I think Jim is able to see that, she needs a good, kind guy. So I got a funny story for you about the American Office. So I am. This was an exciting moment when I got to be on Jack Ryan, and I got to be around John Krasinski. I was obviously a fan. I've watched the American Office 3 times through, all 9 seasons with my sons. Yeah.
22 eps a season.
Oh, yeah. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of hours of my life have been dedicated to a fictional office place that sells paper. But it's also just been bonding time with my kids because they thought it was funny as well. And anyways, we were hanging out on set. We were actually shooting one of the last scenes that I was in, and we were in one of the beach towns, Cartagenas in Colombia. And, I mean, I was kind of hoping that he would bring it up. I kind of wanted to, but I'm also thinking, gosh, this has got to be like, this guy till the day that he dies, people are going to be calling out Jim and talking to him about The Office, even though he's accomplished so much more with A Quiet Place, 13 Hours, many. He's a brilliant producer, brilliant writer. But he did start to share stories because he was doing something for a charity, and he was signing posters or something like this. And I think there might have been Jack Ryan posters or something at the time that they were going to auction off. And I think Michael, who is on House of Cards, another brilliant actor as well, was on the series. And so they were commiserating. Now, they were both at the top of the call sheet. So I was just happy to be in the room, just kind of overhearing the conversation. And I heard him talk about something, and I'm going to butcher the story, but he kind of just made an offhand comment, not out of disrespect to the series, but just more like, gosh, who would have thunk that this one audition, because I don't know if you know the backstory, but it was like, I think he was either bartending or something, but dude, he was not working. And I think his agent or his manager just kind of sent him this thing, and just on a whim, he auditions for this thing that would literally change
his entire
life. He thought he was just going to go back to his normal life. And I mean, it utterly changed. But this is what he said, and I'll butcher it. He said something like, who would have thought that I would have spent 9 years of my life doing double takes to the camera?
I know.
Because it's a device but as an actor, I don't know that people understand this a lot, but quite often when you land on a series, it's 1 or 2 auditions. You're pre-signing a contract that says you're committed to the thing for 6 or 7 years. And of course, 99.9% of the time, you either don't get it or the series doesn't get past the pilot. And then this guy walks in and he improvised about something. I want to say there was something about an eggplant, but I might be making that up.
Yeah. He really has modeled his character on Martin Freeman's. Like you can tell with the double takes. He's very similar to the way Martin Freeman does it, from the haircut to everything. It's very, very similar. but he puts his own slant on it. I think, you know what I mean? He's less, I feel the characters in the British office are a little bit pathetic in some
even
ways.
more loserish.
Yeah, a little bit. And I think, that there's a sadness about the UK. There's a smallness about
There's a little bit of dreariness.
There is dreariness about it. It's filmed in Slough, which is not a nice place.
Give us context. What would Slough be like?
Slough
is it like the armpit
West
of
London.
The Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when I was filming Tomb Raider, Pinewood is near Slough.
Well, sure, because it's probably cheap real estate, right? Where it's soundstage.
Well, maybe, yeah. But like, it's not a very nice part of London.
Okay.
At all.
Yeah.
Like in any way, shape, or form. Very dreary. But that's what Ricky Gervais wanted to capture was, come on, listen, you watch that and you're laughing and it's painful because who the hell would want to work in a paper merchant? There couldn't be a more boring product on earth than paper.
But this is the irony, though, is to watch Ricky Gervais and Michael Scott.
Monkey! He goes, monkey!
Pointing at the monkey puppet. I think one of my favorite parts of the British office is the music video. Once they wrap the series, his music video.
Oh my Lord. That is, if you don't know me, if you don't know me. He's so funny. Oh my Lord. I can watch it all the time. But do you know what? He went on from there to do extras. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Brilliant.
That was
HBO,
another amazing TV series. But,
Well, his superpower, because if you go and then you watch, what's the one where he plays a character that is has challenges, physical challenges. This is the most diplomatic. Derek.
Yep.
Another brilliant series by him. The latest one about the husband whose wife died, the Afterlife.
Afterlife.
Yeah. I watched a few episodes of that. I got to a place with the language, and with him it was a little bit darker and less funny. And I was like, I don't know that I'm on for this. But I've watched all the other three series. I think what Ricky Gervais actually had, and I didn't appreciate this when I saw the British office, because it was, that's the only thing I knew about him.
Mm-hmm.
By the time he hits Derek, what I think he's actually able to do, and I think he does brilliant work in Derek.
He does.
Derek, for me, is, yes, there's a lot of offensive things in it, specifically the other character that drinks a lot.
They are funny, though. Oh my Lord.
But brilliant actors all around. The guy that's the tinkerer and fixes everything, just brilliant.
He's in Afterlife as well.
Oh, just absolutely. But what he was able to do in Derek is to take people that are disregarded, thrown off as losers.
Yep.
And he makes them so incredibly empathetic that you end up crying.
That's the genius of, with David Brent, who's the Michael Scott in the UK. He might be a terrible boss, but the audience still have some level of hope for him.
That is so hard to pull off.
It's like trying to play a villain.
And make him lovable. That's the genius about, because you've got to think at some point, I can relate to some element of that, of how they fell, how any part of humanity can turn anyway. And I think Ricky Gervais does that in such a beautiful way, even in his stand-up, which is, very, but he's funny because he's like, listen, comedy's on the table for anything. Yeah, and I would say he is religious about that notion. I know that you and I have had discussions about his the Golden Globes.
Oh, well, listen, don't keep employing him if you don't like him. How many seasons? How many did he do? 3, 4?
I think he did.
Maybe. So people go, oh, it's Ricky Gervais, but you keep bringing him back because the audiences love him.
Well, I think the audience loved them. The celebrities sitting there, including Tom Hanks and whatnot, that were being literally eviscerated.
Yeah.
I think, what is the expression? Took a piss?
Taking the piss
out of someone.
But gosh, he's just so funny. But I think Steve Carell is a genius.
Yeah,
I think he's a brilliant actor.
And something that they said about Steve Carell, and I think this is on some of the podcast stuff that the actor, forgive me for forgetting his name, we'll put it in the notes, and maybe we'll put a link to the podcast produced by and written by Kevin. The guy who plays Kevin and the big guy in the American Office talks about the culture that Steve Carell created on set.
Oh, really?
Oh, 100%. 100%. There was such kindness, respect, honor, generosity, greeted everybody, treated everybody. Didn't matter whether you were driving the van or whatever you were doing. And actually, it was a top-down thing. I think even at one point, I think he refused to take a raise if the money wasn't going to be spread to the entire cast.
Wow, that's so cool.
So an incredibly dignified man. Well, listen, I'm glad and I'm proud of you for finally coming over.
And I would even say
to the light side.
Thank you. And I would even say controversially again, I like Steve Carell that much. I prefer Evan Almighty to Bruce Almighty. You know, he's just. I think he brings
to kick up controversy.
Absolutely, controversy. So yeah, so that's my confession to you that I've just started to watch the American Office, and I am loving it. So good job, Americans.
Well, we're proud of you, and maybe we'll finally grant you your your American citizenship.
I can't wait. 3.5 more years, baby, then it's done.
Thanks for hanging out for us for this ridiculously fun episode of the Storia Podcast. Please remember to like, subscribe, follow, give us that 5-star review, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon.